Welcome back to another episode with Sigma 3 Survival School. And today I want to talk about winter boots and my favorite selection. Seemed like a good choice considering we're right in the middle of snowpocalypse, February 2021. We got power out all over the country. We got, people with no heat, and, staying warm is of the utmost importance right now. And, one of the fastest things to get cold out there is your feet. Any kind of extremity when it comes to gloves, when it comes to boots, it's always your hands and feet that are going to get cold first. So I wanted to talk about my experience and my perspective on some kind of top boot choices that are available out there on the market. And let me say right off the bat that I am not necessarily in the budget-friendly crowd. I'm a full-time survival instructor, have been for 10 years, and I run some of the most intensive, immersive survival instructor programs available in the world. And everything that we do is incredibly difficult on gear, and we really kind of put all of the stuff that we wear to a real test. And so I don't buy any kind of cheap equipment. I'm not saying that there's not good cheap equipment out there that is of high quality, but it's difficult to find and hit and miss. And there's just certain brands that produce quality every single time, and they're usually not cheap. So I'm of the buy once, cry once philosophy. I've owned a lot of these boots for many years. I've owned these Mucklucks for 5 years. I've owned these Solomons for several years, and some of my Loa boots I've had for a couple of years. And so I've got a lot of experience in them, and I'm just going to run through them and talk about the pros and cons, a little bit about the specs. It won't be a comprehensive review, and I've got no affiliation with any of these companies, so I'm not getting anything from this, and I paid for all of this equipment with my own money. Now, when it comes to boot selection, there is no one tool option. Not everything is not one boot is going to be perfect for everybody in certain conditions. If you're in an arid, flat climate versus someone else in a mountainous, rocky climate, then you're going to need something different. So these are kind of just a baseline for boots based on temperature and a little bit about activity level. So I'm going to list them from the coldest conditions to the coolest conditions and uses. And so the first boot I want to talk about is the Steger Mucklucks, and these are referred to as the Camucks, and they're more of a new age of sorts muckluck that is rubber coated, has much greater water resistance than a traditional muckluck. And if you don't know what a muckluck is, spend a little time and Google that, but it's essentially what traditional northern people, Inuit people in traditional tribes in Canada and really cold environments would wear to keep their feet warm. And of all the boots that are available out there for warmth rating, there is absolutely nothing that is going to beat a muckluck. I mean, hands down, it is probably one of the warmest boots on the planet. You might be able to find some technical boots that have a little bit better performance, but it would be hard to say that there's another boot out there that stays warmer and is better in long-term field conditions. And there's a reason behind that. One of the reasons that mucklucks are so amazing is that they have removable liners. And so anytime you're wearing a boot, your body is leaking water vapor, right? And so you're essentially over time, whether you're sweating, whether you have any activity at all, you're starting to build up condensation inside of your boot, especially in Gore-Tex boots. And sometimes your feet are getting completely wet, either from sweat and not from external elements. Well, the beauty of a muckluck is that it has a removable felt wool liner. And that becomes a big advantage when you're in really cold environments and your insulation has become less than effective because of the condensation and moisture buildup in it. And so when you have a pair of mucklucks, you can take these and you can set them out next to the fire each night and renew the quality of your insulation, whereas in another type of boot that has, built-in insulation that is non-removable, you can't do that, and it becomes very difficult to dry those boots in the field. So the biggest advantage with these is the removable liners. Now, there's also some big cons to these types of boots. So if you're, hiking in the Rocky Mountains, or you're going up more technical ascents, or coming up and down, they don't tend to have a lot of traction. They don't have a lot of ankle support, and in general, they're not going to be the most waterproof boot. And so, there's some real disadvantages to having a boot like this, but if you are not moving a whole lot and warmth is of the utmost importance, so let's say you're ice fishing, hunting, you're sitting around at camp, you're not hiking 5-10 miles a day, your movement is somewhat reduced then, and the temperatures are, below 10 degrees Fahrenheit, then the muckluck is going to be kind of your go-to boot. It's going to keep your feet warm no matter what. The next boot that I want to talk about are the Salomon Ultra Winners, and these are a great technical boot when you're needing to move long distances under cool to cold conditions and keep your feet warm. And the way that I learned about these is actually a buddy of mine who's a special naval warfare operator that worked with the SEALs in Afghanistan. He'd been doing like 300 missions a year in high altitude, under heavy ruck loads, and he'd gone through, at least a couple of 100 combat missions wearing a pair of these boots, and really, stood behind them and said that they were fantastic. And so I went ahead and picked up a pair of them, and I've been wearing them for, I guess, about 3 years throughout the winters, and they're just really a fantastic boot in general. They're incredibly lightweight. I mean, these things, they probably don't weigh any more than my tennis shoes. It really kind of blows my mind how excellent Salomon is at producing super lightweight boots. And, when you're hiking long miles at elevation, coming up and down, constantly, ankle rotation and things like that, having a lighter weight boot becomes a really big time advantage on your overall cardio and how far you can go throughout the day. The difference in a pound, like these Loa boots right next to them, same size, are at least a pound heavier. And it makes all the difference in the world, when you're hiking longer distances, especially if you're carrying a ruck. So I like these boots when I need to move long distances where I'm not going to necessarily be sedentary for long periods of time. The advantage of the mucklucks is that they'll keep me warm and have removable liners, and these don't have removable liners. They have built-in insulation, so they've got Thinsulate, and that is great for keeping your feet warm until it gets wet. And so once it starts getting wet, then obviously your insulation is degraded and reduced. And so from day 1 to day 5 of hiking, if you don't take the time at night to dry your boots out, your feet are going to get colder and colder, each day. Now, as a survival instructor, probably my most used boot all throughout the year, from cool conditions, I would say 20 degrees and up, is the Loa Z8 GTX. And I've had these for, I think, going on about 3 years now. And man, are they bomb-proof. They are amazing, amazing boots. Now, the downside of Loa is that you're really going to get your checkbook out for these bad boys. But buy once, cry once. I mean, if you're going to buy a pair of boots and you're very into outdoor activities, these are going to last you. They should, depending on how many miles you put in, they should last you 5 to 10 years. The average person is going to get a lot of use out of these, and they're going to last a lot longer than your Salomon boots as well. Salomon is an amazing brand. but over time they just have a tendency to wear out, and I've seen the soles of them delaminate. Not from my own boots personally, but I've seen it from a lot of other people. You'll get a lot of miles out of them, but they're half the price for a reason. You're not going to delaminate these boots. Your soles aren't going to fall off. And of all the boots out there on the market, I probably use Loa boots more than any other brand name. And so the Z8 is an 8-inch boot, which I tend to prefer. And the reasoning behind that is when bug season comes on and you've got lots of ticks and chiggers and things like that out there, you can not only wear this in the cool to cold weather, you can also wear it in warmer weather and keep bugs out. And so I'll actually tuck my pants into my boots, and that acts as a type of bug armor. You know, if the bugs can't get to your skin in the first place, then they can't bite you. And so that's where an 8-inch boot comes at a real advantage. There's a reason that the military pretty much exclusively uses 8-inch boots versus something like this other Loa boot, which is a 6-inch. Now, if bugs and higher water aren't of concern, then, you know, something like the Camino GTX is a great option. Now, this is quite a bit heavier boot. This is a boot that I picked up for trekking with a ruck in Colorado, going up 14ers and you know, taller mountains. It's much more abrasion resistant. It's going to have more ankle support. It's going to be a more rigid, less flexible boot. You know, so it is a more technical boot per se, and has less kind of general purpose use for the average kind of hiker. So if you're a person in the Midwest or you know, out in the Appalachians or in an area that is flatter, I would personally go with a boot more like this than something like this 6-inch that is designed more for heavy rucking and heavy elevation, has less foot arch. Like, there's just not a lot of flex in this boot at all. And the reasoning behind that is when you're heading up steep hills, it helps provide support for your feet to where you're not flexing at extreme angles and wearing your feet out, you know, when you're carrying a 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 pound rucksack. You know, good boot for elk hunters, great boot for the Rockies. And this is probably a better boot for most people all the way around. And so it's my most used boot. Now, I wouldn't consider these necessarily strict winter boots. You know, I saved them for last because they have overlap. I wanted to give you the mucklucks as being the coldest. And then we've got the ultra winters as kind of your -10 to, you know, 20 degree kind of mark. And your mucklucks are down to -50, and these are pretty much 20 degrees and up. You put, you know, a couple of pairs of socks, always wool. You know, if you really need to increase the warmth rating on these, you do a thinner, you know, layer wool sock, and then you put a thicker one over that, and that'll help move moisture away from your feet, keep you a lot warmer. And then for, you know, warmer conditions, obviously you're just going to do one layered sock. So these are some basic options for you guys to choose from. And you know, there's a lot of boots out there, but as a survival instructor, these are kind of my top choices. And as someone who wears boots all the time for a living, it really does mean the difference in me being miserable out teaching people in super cold, nasty conditions and being extraordinarily comfortable. You know, so when choosing boots, choose wisely and always bring extra socks.